Tarantino has written 11 screenplays, 10 if you count Kill Bill as one film, and he has directed every single one of them, except this week's episode, True Romance. Released in 1993 and hardly a hit, True Romance has come to be regarded as one of the best films of the 90s and one of the best films Tony Scott ever directed. At the time, Scott was known for directing high-octane films such as Top Gun. True Romance was a departure since it contained far more nuanced characters and outright violence. But True Romance sticks out as possibly his best work. And Scott brought together a hyper style to True Romance that comes from his commercial background. Part of this is his love for slow motion action, where you can see the effects of punches and bullets. And this style has been adopted by countless directors, including most notably Michael Bay, who has used it to create his signature Bayhem. At the time of its release, True Romance was not the box office hit its writer, Quentin Tarantino, would later enjoy. But the film was a breakthrough for Tarantino and his eventual directorial career. Released after Reservoir Dogs, it was his first screenplay for a major motion picture. Tarantino has said it remains his most autobiographical film to date. Of course, we know he had several roommates who represent Floyd, and we know that the character of Clarence is pretty close to a representation of Tarantino himself. But beyond that, I'm just curious, what else is autobiographical about this film? Was it the meet cute in a theater with a sex worker? The eventual confrontation with her pimp? The accidental procurement of a suitcase full of uncut cocaine? The eventual shootout with the men who want said cocaine back and the men who want to buy it? The animal print clothing? The Elvis sunglasses? The love of cheeseburgers? We do get a key scene in his later film, Pulp Fiction, where Vincent and Jules walk in on Brett, who just wants to enjoy a big kahuna burger, but ultimately does not. In any case, autobiographical in whatever sense, True Romance remains for Quentin Tarantino. Quentin had originally wanted to direct True Romance, but lost interest in directing and simply sold the script for $33,000, and that's about $69,000 today. Nice. And like Clarence in Alabama, he took the money and ran. Only he knows if he got advice from the ghost of Elvis along the way. And to Tony Scott's credit, Tarantino was happy with how True Romance turned out and credits this to director Tony Scott. He initially opposed director Scott's decision to change the ending, saying, "I just fell in love with these two characters and didn't want to see them die." And we thank you for that change, Tony, because without that change, this could not have been a Real Relationships podcast episode. So thank you. And True Romance has become known as one of the best movies of the 1990s due to Tony Scott's handling of Quentin Tarantino's script. And this came off as, it's been described as the cinematic equivalent of cocaine-flavored bubblegum, a quote, bright, flavorsome confection that had an intoxicatingly violent kick. And it also drew some tremendously big names to its supporting cast. Most notably, the Hopper walk-in scene, since named the Sicilian scene, was inspired by a friend of a roommate of Tarantino's. Maybe Floyd's, maybe not. Quote, "I had heard that whole speech about the Sicilians a long time ago. I was talking with a friend who was Sicilian and who began telling that speech, and I thought, wow, that is a great scene. I gotta remember that." And again, True Romance was not a commercial success upon its initial release, but found additional fame when Tarantino began making his mark. And with audiences clamoring for information and every ounce of media, they found his old projects, and True Romance became a cult classic. And in the last 30 years, True Romance has succeeded among audiences because it does something very specifically Tarantino-esque. It cannot be defined as a romance, a comedy, a drama, or even a gangster film. It has no business being in any one category. In fact, it has a habit of finding its way into each and every genre with minimal effort. When the characters are in their most dire circumstances, they make gallows humor jokes that do not send the movie off track. And this formula simply works. Tarantino has the perfect ear for interesting dialogue, and True Romance provides it in spades with the attention that only Tony Scott could deliver. 30 years after its release, True Romance remains a movie that seems to be more greatly appreciated with each passing generation, and it was a formative one for its writer. So go ahead and give the subscribe button a good kung fu kick so you never miss a thing. We appreciate our listeners, our viewers, our supporters of the Real Relationships podcast. On that note, new episodes drop every Thursday, and you can find the Real Relationships podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. And new episodes of this channel also drop every Thursday. I always say it, stay safe, especially if you are in the seedy underbelly of 1993's Detroit, and we will see you soon.